Hi guys, you're watching Halborn Flash videos. Today we have got Aragon joining us in for this chat today. So Anthony, welcome, and maybe you could go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. So I'm Anthony. I'm the relatively new CEO of Aragon. I've been on the team for almost 3 years, but recently was promoted in a big restructuring. Yeah, Aragon has been around since 2017. We launched the first DAO framework, which projects such as Lido, Decentraland, and Curve are using, for example. To date, we probably have over $33 billion in TVL on this protocol we call Aragon OS. And since then, recently, about a year ago, we launched a new DAO framework based off of the learnings from the old one. And we made a much more modular DAO framework, which has a lot of great value propositions that we can discuss later. But we also create a really nice and friendly UI for people to be able to no code, launch a DAO, launch an ERC20 vote standard token, and be able to really start participating, voting, securing their assets and their protocols all on chain. So that's basically what we do.
Amazing. And that answer was loaded with so many follow-up questions because of all the features you highlighted, right? So
Sure.
going into it, you talked about Aragon OS. What are some of the newest features that have been building up over the last year or so?
Yeah, I would say definitely the understanding Aragon OS X, which is the new one, is that its primitive is permissions. So when you're thinking of, projects can, and DAOs in particular can build any type of governance style or type that they want on this framework. And it's not subjected to just, token weighted voting. It's not just a multi-sig, right? The primitive itself is permissions. There is no one governance primitive that it's designed for. It's agnostic to that. In fact, it's actually agnostic to even token-based governance. So we really built it to be very open in that sense. You can build any type of governance, multi-body governance with multiple processes. And it can even be with digital identification, although now we particularly have token-based DAOs, but it really opens up a huge potential for the organizations of the future, which is great. And that's why we sort of say like we want anybody to experiment with governance at the speed of software. And we are quite, what we've learned from the past with projects such as Lido and et cetera that are built on Aragon's old stack, which is monolithic. The competitor of our own stack is our old stack, Aragon OS, and as well as Open Zeppelin Governor, which is quite well known. And these are monolithic DAO frameworks, and they're very powerful and whatnot. But we learned that DAOs were struggling once they had launched their code and launched their DAO. Making changes after is quite complex, quite risky, and what ends up happening is they're sort of stuck in their own DAOs and their own style of governance. And so, with our new stack, we decided to make it very modular in the hope of making it more open, more adaptable, right? And what that means is that the DAO framework, so the actual like DAO code base itself is separated from the governance logic. So what we call plugins. And so anybody can have their DAO, which is audited, you don't need to fork it. And then you can build your governance logic on top. You can say, I want a VE token model. I want to build multi-body governance where voters can vote, but then another group of token holders can veto, right? And these can be plugged in. They can be uninstalled, they can be installed, and you can really change your governance on the fly, which is really, really cool and decrease the risk, right? It means that somebody like Halborn doesn't necessarily now need to audit the entire code base. Halborn can really focus on auditing that one plugin, which is new and novel, and they can really just look at that and see how that interacts. Which is great for organizations as well. And then it can all be reused. There's network effects now, right? If you don't need to fork a code base, you get network effects, which is really interesting. And so this means instead of, somebody trying to fork the Aave DAO and, which don't govern, and then trying to build it to their own needs, and then all these security complexities come up, right? Now, if the plugin, the style of governance already exists as a plugin and it's already audited by Halborn, you can actually just plug that into a DAO and you can get going right off the bat. And if you make some minute changes to it, right, then you can get a very small audit, and it decreases the risk. So there's a lot of great value propositions. There's obviously the adaptability I spoke about, how you can change your governance over time, all on chain. right? And what this means is that it obviously decreases risk, increases developer speed. So yeah, we're very excited about this new DAO framework that we launched about a year ago and starting to get good traction.
Great. That was an absolutely fantastic explanation of everything going on, by the way. So there's modularity, there's plugins, there's more flexibility and freedom, and that means more developer speed, and also like you create better ecosystems, there's network effect and scaling, and
Exactly.
all of that coming into place, which is fantastic. I also hear you have got maintenance, multi-chain governance partnerships going on with especially Layer 0 and ZK Sync. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that too?
Yeah, so we find two things very, very important for DAOs in the future, which we learned from the past, is one, they need to be more modular and thus adaptable in a safe way. And number two, we need to decrease the cost for voters, just generally. The methodologies in the past have been to move off-chain, to use something like Snapshot, which is just off-chain voting, or it's been to try and create delegate voting, which we do offer also, which is giving away your voting power to somebody who takes on that cost of not just the cost of voting, but also the cost of learning and knowing what's happening and participating for you. Right. But then we thought, okay, there must be a better way to do this. So we decided to launch what originally was just meant to be like a cross-chain governance plugin, but then it actually is multi-chain now. So what that means, it means that your DAO can live on a layer 1. So then it has maximum security. It's unstoppable, an unstoppable organization, we like to say. But now you can actually, your token holder base can vote on an L2. It can even pull the voting power from across different L2s. So say you have your tokens across different L2s, we can pull that voting power, onto one chain, which we partnered with ZK Sync originally on this. And then your voter gets to vote with an L2 cost, right? So now instead of in between $3 and $10, it really depends on gas prices, obviously, a vote. Now you're talking about 1 cent, half a cent to vote, again, depending on gas costs, right? Now, what we then hope to do is, right, you add a paymaster in, you can abstract away the costs, and now you have gasless voting on chain for your voters while your DAO is still living on an L1. And we partnered with, Carlos, obviously partnered with Layer 0 to start and with ZK Sync for our initial V1 plugin. And we're now looking at a V2 plugin, which then we would actually bake into our UI. And so now it's not just like currently we have the developer can come in and take this plugin and work with it, add it into their own DAO UI, etc. Now we want to put that into our own UI and basically like abstract away the complexities. Your voter comes in and they can get a free or 1 cent vote on a mainnet DAO. And we think this is going to be game changer. This is really going to be like finally enable all these organizations voting off chain with no verifiability, with less transparency, with trusted multisigs, and move them away from that and move them onto true on-chain governance, all on chain and for the same cost and same user experience.
Awesome. So lower costs, more abstraction, and obviously a lot better user experience, like continuing on the abstraction line. So that's wonderful to hear. At Halborn, we have had a really long-standing partnership with Aragon. So I think we've been working together since the beginning of 2022, pretty much. We have done a lot of continual security assessments. So what made you choose Halborn, and what made you stay with Halborn for this long?
Yeah, I think reputation was one of the biggest things for our initial outreach and why we chose Halborn, that you have a great reputation. But actually, the reason we've stayed with you and why we like working with you is that your team is very flexible. I know we needed to launch quite quickly. We needed to like move this audit more quickly, and you guys were able to make that happen for us. You're able to be flexible and work within our constraints. So for us, that's really, really important because in our industry, things are moving fast, things are ever changing. You need the highest level of security, of course, but you also need somebody to work with you to be flexible, because there's always things changing. There's always things that we need to adapt to. So I think those were the two main things, like great reputation and also great flexibility in working with us.
That's wonderful to hear. You come from the world of DAOs. So what's the biggest security challenge that you see today when it comes to DAOs?
Yeah, wow, what a great question. I think there's multiple facets. There's like the social layer. I always look at DAOs as two things. There's like the pure technological layer. A DAO is a permission management system with a vault. And then there's the social layer, which is very important for DAO as well, which is, well, how decentralized are you on the social layer? And really, the answer doesn't need to be the most decentralized. It needs to be whatever it is to reach your goal. I like to use Lido as a great example because they're quite a mature DAO, right? And they need to be extremely resilient, right? They need to ensure that they cannot be captured by any bad actor or nation state, right? They're playing at that level. And thus they need to ensure that they're more decentralized on the social layer, and then also that their tech stack is extremely, on decentralized rail on mainnet. They're not playing around with, different things for their DAO. They're trying to keep things very, very safe. When they work on something like delegation right now, they're trying to add, which is complex in the older stacks. They take their time to do that. So I think in terms of like where there are risks, obviously on the technological layer, in the permissions, if people are actually making upgrades to their DAO, and changing the governance on these old monolithic frameworks. And there was a hack many, many years ago. I forget the name of the DAO, but they forgot to uninstall a permission, basically, which somebody was able to access and drain the funds. So actually, from that learning, those years and years and years ago, and that was on that particular DAO that forked that code base. Now we've actually created a tool that when you, as a DAO on the new Aragon OSx, decide to change your governance, right, or make an upgrade to a plugin, not the whole thing. Actually, we've built a system that checks if you've done the right checks and balances on your permissions and uninstalled the right permissions. And so we've actually obfuscated that away so it does it for you. And so I think that is definitely, from a technological perspective, something that people need to be aware of if they're on old monolithic stacks.
Absolutely.
And then from a social, like a security perspective, I mean, Aragon itself has gone through challenges on the social governance side of things. ENS now decided to put some things in place to try and defend their DAO from governance attacks. So I think we have to be extremely aware of, who is your token holder base? How much liquidity is there for your token for people to buy a lot amounts of it? These types of more social things are actually, and a lot of people would say that many DAOs are attacked very slowly through poor proposals that try and take funds away to do things that don't create a lot of value. So I think you have to be aware that when you launch your DAO, from a technical perspective, yes, you have to be very aware. But from a social level, you also have to be very aware, and you have to have the right checks and balances in place to ensure that it's done safely and securely. And that's why a modular stack enables you to create these things. Like we can put in a veto multi-sig in that's all on chain, right? That only under certain circumstances can veto a malicious protocol upgrade, things like this. Like you can really start to get into the weeds and build really safe things, safety mechanisms along the way.
Got it. Yeah, I guess DAOs are a bit more complex in the sense that there's technical, but then there's also like a world of social risk that can come into place as well. Thank you so much for joining us on this chat. This was great, filled with a lot of details. Thank you again.